Well, hopefully you liked all those videos and you can see why I assigned you to watch them. Um, let's move on to some of the implications of empathy. When people are feeling empathy towards other people or other creatures, they're more likely to help those creatures or people. So when we focus on the needs of the victim or we focus on the emotions of the victim, we tend to be more likely to help. We tend to feel empathy for those who are the most similar to us. So somebody of our same sex might get more help from us, or somebody of our same basic age, or someone of our same skin color, or our same hair type, or same style of dress, or recognizing that they're from the same area as we are, right? Maybe you're visiting a national park somewhere in the United States and someone has a Washington state license plate. You might be more likely to help that person because you also have a Washington state license plate. They're similar to you. You don't know them, but they're similar to you. And so you're more likely to feel empathy for them. We feel more empathy for victims who we think did not cause their own distress. So if a random bad thing happens to somebody, we're more likely to feel empathy for them because we can imagine ourselves having that same random bad thing happen to us. If instead they did something that we could point to, that we could say that's why they're experiencing what they're experiencing, we're less likely to feel empathetic. I'll give you a good example. People oftentimes show lower levels of empathy towards smokers who become ill than towards non-smokers that get the same illness. It's not even clear necessarily that smoking causes that illness, but if you're a smoker and you get sick, well, I mean, you smoke, right? There's like this little lack of empathy, like you sort of brought this on yourself kind of thing. When we think that we can find something to point to say, you know what, you did something and that's why you're having this experience, it kind of makes us feel like protected, because if we don't do those same things, it's not going to get us because we don't do the things that made it happen, even if that's not the thing that made it happen. That's the crazy thing. We think it's the thing that made it happen, and now we feel safe because we don't do the thing that you did to make it happen. So if the person is perceived to have not contributed to their own outcome, we feel more empathy for them. If we can find something to blame it on that they did themselves, then we say, well, I mean, what did they expect? So here are some examples of times when people tend to be empathetic: victims of terrorism, victims of earthquakes, victims of floods. We say, well, random bad things happen. Now, you might say, well, maybe you shouldn't have been living where it tends to flood. That's a little lack of empathy because you're thinking, well, you did something to contribute to that. Victims of terrorism, maybe you would say, well, maybe if you weren't hanging around with the very people who you know the terrorists don't like, you wouldn't have gotten caught up with it. You wouldn't have been there to be the victim of the terroristic attack. Things like that. I mean, we oftentimes will, even in the face of something that you couldn't have really predicted and that the person's behavior really didn't lead to their outcome, we'll still kind of like moderate our level of empathy by saying, you did something questionable. There's something I could point to. So we're less empathetic if we think they brought it on themselves. Now, our likelihood of helping somebody goes up if we're experiencing personal distress when witnessing their need. So if you see, let's say, this image, and then there's a plea for, $30 a month to help kids like this, you might be experiencing distress to think there are kids who live like this and might be more willing to contribute or to help than if you don't feel personal distress. If this doesn't move you, you might be thinking, what am I going to do about it? Like, where are their parents? You might think those kinds of thoughts instead. So the likelihood of helping goes up if your personal distress goes up to a point. If you're overwhelmed with distress, it actually reduces the likelihood of helping because you may not be able to think of anything that you can do to help. You may feel like the overwhelming bad feeling that you're having might drive you to just want to block out the victims, and you might say to yourself, this is too much, I can't face it. So you want to have a certain amount of personal distress, but not so much that you become overwhelmed. So we tend to experience personal distress in the face of people who are experiencing something negative when we notice our own feelings. I put preoccupied, and when we're noticing our own feelings, we experience more personal distress. We're more likely to help if when we notice those feelings, we want to make them go down. We want to reduce them. We want to make them go away. So if we're motivated to try and make them go away, we might come to the conclusion that helping the victims will make us feel less distress. And so we might be more likely to engage in helping. It might be egoistic helping, where we are helping not because we purely just want to help the victims, but because we want to stop feeling the way that we're feeling. And we're more likely to engage in that kind of helping when we can't escape the situation any other way. Maybe every day you have to walk past this, maybe homeless person with their dog who looks cold and hungry, and every day you see this and there's nothing you can do to escape. It may foster egoistic helping because you might be thinking, I can't keep feeling like this every day, and so I want to feel better, and maybe I'll feel better if I help these people, and the dog and the person. So if we can't easily escape it or ignore it, that's another defense mechanism we might implement. We might just say, I go blind for this stuff. I just walk past and I don't see, I don't notice. And that way I don't have to feel bad. I don't have to get wrapped up in the emotions that are being triggered by seeing this. So we're more likely to help if we can't escape the situation or ignore the situation. So empathy plus no escape actually makes it more likely that we'll help. If there's nothing else we can do, then we may, if we can do other things, we probably would do those things. But if we can't, then we are more likely to help. There are other factors that contribute to the likelihood of helping. Sex is one of those factors. Males are more likely to help in the form of like good Samaritans. So that means that they're more likely to help strangers. They're more likely to help people who are in jeopardy of some sort. They're more willing to do things that maybe have some risk associated with it, or that could get them dirty, right? That might get them wet because they're out in the rain, or cold because they're out in the snow. They're more willing to do that kind of helping. Whereas on average, females are more likely to do this sort of ongoing caregiving that you see when you have like family members in need or friends in need, stuff like that. So male helping is more risky and more likely to target like strangers or people who you might have contact with once. Females, the helping behavior tends to be much more ongoing and tends to be directed at people that they know. This is on average, of course. This is not describing every male and female in the world, but on average, you see these group differences. It's more likely for males to behave in a good Samaritan way when they believe themselves to be physically capable. If they've assessed the situation and they think, I think I can handle that. If they have the relevant training, they're more likely to behave in a good Samaritan way because they know how to do it. Maybe they feel competent climbing over that cliff edge to try and recover, the dog that's fallen or whatever. Males on average who are more instrumental in their orientation of the world, that is, they tend to score high in a scale that measures that, which means that they are more likely to perceive themselves as being capable of doing these kinds of active helping behaviors. They see themselves that way. Females who display empathy are more likely to exhibit the helping behavior, especially in this caregiver role. If they have a sense of duty, right? Like they feel like, well, I'm the only daughter, and in my culture, daughters help their parents, or I'm the mom, and so I need to help my children, or, well, I'm home in the afternoon, so I can help my neighbor. If they have this sense of duty, like if not me, then who kind of situation, then they're more likely to step into that caregiver role. And then females who are higher on expressiveness, the females who score higher on this kind of scale tend to be more empathetic. They tend to display more empathy, and so that may help to contribute to them behaving in a caregiver role. All right. Now, snap judgments affect the empathy that we may be experiencing. So take a look at this picture and just note to yourself, what's the first thing you see in this picture? Like, what is the first face that you're able to detect? Your options are young lady, old lady, man with mustache, right? So there are 3 faces buried in here. Snap judgment. So like the first thing you saw is what we mean by snap judgment. Now, there's nothing about this particular ambiguous figure that's relevant to empathy. I just wanted to use it as an illustration of what a snap judgment is, because it's the first thing that you noticed is what we're talking about. A lot of times in situations where empathy might be displayed, there are multiple ways to interpret what's happening, right? It's an ambiguous situation. And so you could interpret it as, well, that person brought it on themselves, or they're just a pure victim, or this is something worthy of help, or that's not worthy. Like, there are multiple ways that you could interpret the situation. It's how you make your initial decision. And part of what determines whether you help an individual or not is whether they're similar to you or not. So a lot of your assessment of whether they're similar to you will be based on a snap judgment, sort of first glance kind of assessment, right? You're sort of going to glance at them and think, oh, they're roughly my age, or they're the same sex I am, or something like that. It's a quick judgment. It may not even be correct, and it probably is not the only judgment that could be relevant to making the decision, but it's the one that you made first, and that's what we mean by a snap judgment. So this little video, we're going to quickly hop over to YouTube because it's not worth making a playlist out of it. So this guy is going to let his Venus flytrap bite his tongue. I don't know why he thinks this is cool, but oh, nice. Okay, so I'm kind of judging him, honestly, because why are you doing this? But what I wanted to talk about is the Venus flytrap. I wasn't here to talk about the guy. I was here to talk about the Venus flytrap. The Venus flytrap made a snap judgment. Food, right? And snapped it when it got touched, it snapped shut, because the assumption is things that touch the inner hairs on a Venus flytrap must be food. And so close and try and eat it. That's a snap judgment. It's kind of literally and figuratively a snap judgment, because it makes its judgment and snaps closed on whatever trying to catch that fly or whatever it thinks it is. Those kinds of snap judgments cause us to assess situations very quickly and sometimes incorrectly. When we make snap judgments, we tend to be more prone to displaying the fundamental attribution error. What that means, the fundamental attribution, that term refers to our assumption, oftentimes, that people from Western cultures, men in particular, tend to make the assumption that the current behavior that we're observing is due to some kind of disposition that the actor holds. Oh, they're driving like that because they're a jerk, right? Not that they're driving like that because there was a box in their lane and they had to go around it and happened to, seemingly cut us off in our lane. It wasn't something about the situation that made them drive like that. It's because they're a jerk. That's why they drive like that. That's a fundamental attribution error. We're attributing their behavior to something, and it turns out that fundamentally we are attributing it to the wrong thing. We're saying that's how they are, when in fact they might be behaving in that way because of situations. We fail to take the circumstances into account. We don't think about that at all. I was watching Idiots in Cars the other day, and everybody was slowing down, and the people towards the back were assuming that they weren't really going to slow down or stop on the freeway. So they start rear-ending everybody in the back because somebody was stopping, because guess what? There was something in the road. But the people in the back were assuming, what is this crazy person doing? They're going to figure it out and start going fast again. And so next thing you know, they're rear-ending people because they just assumed crazy driver doesn't know how to drive and they're going to figure it out. When we're experiencing the fundamental attribution error, we are less empathetic towards our target than if we are not experiencing that. When we think that the crazy driver in front of us is gonna figure it out, that's not us showing empathy. That is us saying, they need to get it together, they're just in my way. That fundamental attribution error where we think the person is behaving the way that they are because that is how they are. It's their disposition. It's their personality. They would be behaving like this no matter where we are right now. This is how they'd be acting. That makes us less empathetic. If we assume that they are behaving in response to the situation, we're much more empathetic. So let's take a look at the empathy practice that you can engage in, which is on page 58 of our book. Let me get my 8 here. And so here are some frustrating situations, and you're supposed to, write down, and please be honest, write down the first thought, make a snap judgment. No one is going to see what you wrote down. So make your snap judgment. Your pizza order gets lost and you have to call again and get it delivered. Write down your snap judgment. Write down the first thing that crosses your mind, and then take a second later to think of a compassionate thought. In fact, what I did when I took this is I went through and did all the non-compassionate thoughts first. So I sort of got in a cranky little fundamental attribution error type of loop. And then I went back and looked at all of them again and thought, okay, what else could explain this? What is a nicer way to explain this? What is a more empathetic way to react to this situation? So take a second, go through those and see how you react, and try and do it honestly. Like, don't just give the quote unquote compassionate answers right off. Go through the act of saying, what is my snap judgment in situations like this? Like, go through that exercise so that you can grow and develop from the exercise. All right, I'll see you in the next video.